Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Friday. The weekend is very nearly here. I hope you're having a very good day wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world as we head towards the weekend. Of course, that big game against Aston Villa tomorrow evening at the Emirates. Mikel Arteta will be speaking a bit later on today at his pre-match press conference ahead of that game. By the time you're watching this video or listening to this video, he may well have already done his press conference. We'll get the latest from him in terms of potential team news, that sort of stuff, whatever he's going to say about transfers, because he'll definitely be asked. So we'll get some more from him a little bit later on. I will try and record a video later after the press conference going over some of the big talking points. So you might get a second show from me a little bit later on today. So keep your eyes peeled on that. But today, this morning, I wanted to talk. There's been some fresh new quotes doing around from the agent of Benjamin Sesko. Some exclusive quotes from Fabrizio Romano, who's talked to Elvis Bazanit. I can never get his name right. Apologies, Elvis, if you're watching this. I'm sure you're not. But Elvis Bazanovic. There you go. I think that's right. Bazanovic. I think that is definitely right. So, yes. Anyway, let's just call him Benjamin Sesko's agent. He has been talking to Fabrizio Romano, responding to some stories that have been doing around the last 24 hours or so about Arsenal exploring and holding talks with Leipzig about a potential loan deal for Sesko, which he has certainly poured some cold water on, not surprisingly, because it just didn't make any sense. Why on earth would Leipzig be considering letting him go on a loan this January? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the wider implications of Arsenal and their striker hunt. Erling Haaland has signed a new 10 billion year contract with Manchester City. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on and the possible implications of what that might mean for Manchester City and how they're feeling about their 115 charges, where we'll find out fairly soon whether they're going to face any sort of punishment or not. We'll look ahead to the Aston Villa game, look at some decisions facing Mikel Arteta. We've got some questions and some comments from you guys as well. So plenty to get stuck into in the morning show. And we'll start with those quotes that are doing the rounds from Elvis. We'll just call him Elvis, Benjamin Sesko's agent, on the interest that is doing the rounds with him and Arsenal this January. Now, he's given a couple of interviews, one to Fabrizio and another to Slovenian TV in the last sort of 24 hours or so in response to all the rumours about Benjamin Sesko. What he said to Fabrizio is quite interesting on the back of those reports that suddenly started doing the rounds on social media yesterday that Arsenal were holding talks over a loan deal for Sesko. Myself and James sort of touched on that yesterday in Inside Arsenal Extra Time, and it didn't sound right to me. And this is what Elvis has had to say. He said, I don't know where this story comes. I never talked with Arsenal about a loan for Sesko. Sesko is not a player for loans, never a topic for Arsenal or for any other club, which is pretty strong comments there. Not surprising because it's just, loan just makes absolutely no sense. It was never going to happen. He says, even if we're aware of interest from several top clubs for a long time, if you ask me if Sesko will move in January, all I can say is Sesko is a Leipzig player and only they can answer these questions. So pretty forceful stuff there from Elvis Bazanovic about Sesko and a potential loan move this January, absolutely denying those reports that have been doing the rounds. He also, as I said, spoke to Slovenian TV, and this is what he had to say when he was asked if Sesko is a sort of perfect player for Arsenal. He said, I think you should ask Mr. Arteta about that, but I think Sesko could suit many clubs because he has different football skills. He can play alone in attack with two strikers a little further back. He has height, speed, technical speed. When sort of pushed about whether Arsenal have actually made inquiries, he said, I can't answer that question for you. Benjamin, though, is really shining. I think this is a phase of development. I think we have already shown in the past that we are sticking to the development path, that we are not looking at current form. Our decision regarding the next step, the transfer, has never and will never stem from current form, but from who can offer Sesko the best platform for his development. I think this is really important because, they took a big decision in the summer when Arsenal were knocking and other clubs were interested as well to stay with Leipzig. They thought this is the best development for him. We're going to stay. We're going to sign a new contract. We're going to resist all the offers that are coming in from big European clubs to stay here and continue his development. At the time, I thought it was absolutely the right decision. I could understand why that decision was taken. So I think these comments are quite interesting from him. He now says, he goes on to say, we can see that our decision was correct. 6 months later, he is already a better striker than he was last season. What he lacks is experience. We must not forget that he is only 21 years old. So we did not want him to go to the Premier League last summer. There were concrete options, but we consciously decided to stay in the Bundesliga to give him time to progress and develop into a better striker. Now, I think those comments are quite interesting because, this is the sort of challenge that Arsenal are going to face. If they really want to try and get Sesko out this month, this is the sort of challenge they're going to face. They're going to face a big challenge when it comes to RB Leipzig because you're trying to take their striker away in the middle of the season, which Leipzig would absolutely not have planned for. When he decided to stay and sign that new contract last summer, they would have absolutely been planning on having a full season with Sesko and potentially maybe him going at the end of the season. But definitely not in the middle of the season. So Arsenal are going to face a challenge there with Leipzig in terms of getting a deal done when they're a club who are chasing a Champions League spot halfway through the season. So you've got that challenge, but then you've also got the challenge of convincing Elvis, Bazanovic and Sesko himself that, okay, you didn't want to come last summer because you were worried about not getting as much minutes and your development, potentially being stifled a little bit because you're not playing as much if you go to Arsenal than you would have done if you stayed in Germany. So you've got to have to convince him otherwise that just 6 months later, okay, you're worried about that then, but we can't, that you should come now anyway. So it's a big challenge Arsenal are going to face and it's a big if, because we don't know yet if they are going to try and get Sesko early or not. It's still early days and I say early days, it's only a couple of weeks left of the window, but there's been no suggestion yet that they have absolutely decided that he is the guy that they're going to go for, because it is definitely going to be a challenge. And also, Leipzig aren't stupid as well, or any other club who have got a striker that Arsenal come knocking for aren't stupid. They're going to look at this and say, oh, look, here come Arsenal. This is a team with Bukayo Saka's injured, who have just lost Gabriel Jesus for 9 months. They're going to be in an incredibly strong bargaining position. And Arsenal are going to be in an incredibly weak bargaining position because everyone knows they're desperate for a striker. And that is not ideal when you're going into negotiations over a move. So it's a big challenge for Arsenal. It's one they're going to have to solve. Jason Ito, he's got this interim sporting director's job at the moment. He's potentially in the run-in to get the job on a permanent basis. Well, this is a real tough test for him. If he can pass it, then what better way to throw your hat into the ring and get the job on a full-time basis and so navigating what looks like a really difficult January transfer window in terms of finding someone, but then also negotiating for that player. Lots of you have been getting in touch. I don't want to talk about Erling Haaland yet. Lots of you have been getting in touch with comments about Sesko. I think there's a couple here. Nezai says, but getting Sesko now rules out Isak in the summer. Sesko is a rough diamond and needs work, whereas Isak is the real deal, the finished article, and can still improve. Why do we automatically think we can't get Isak? If we don't get him, then Chelsea will. The thing with Isak is, and look, no one wants Alexander Isak more than me. He's been my number one. I've spoken about it time and time again. He is my number one choice. But the thing is, I just think it's going to be, you're looking at £150 million potentially, I would say, for Isak in the summer. Can Arsenal realistically do that? I just don't think they can. They've got money to spend, no doubt about that. But if you're basically spending it all on just one player there, I don't think you can do it. Newcastle, he's got 3 years left on his contract when he gets to season, it ends the season. So Newcastle are in no pressure to sell. It looks like, they might even be in the title race this season with Newcastle. They're not that far off, but it certainly looks like Champions League spots at the moment. You'd say Newcastle have got a very good chance of finishing top 4. And potentially, you probably only need to finish top 5 this season to get Champions League space in the Premier League. So if they get that, they're going to be under no pressure to sell because they're going to have Champions League money coming in. Alexander Isak's not going to really be bothered about leaving because he's going to have Champions League football at Newcastle anyway. I just think it's so hard. If you're literally saying, right, we're going to put all our eggs in the Isak basket in the summer, I just think it looks such an incredibly difficult deal to do on so many levels that I don't really think you can necessarily just wait and hope that all the things fall in the right places and you manage to get that deal done. In it below says Sesko isn't top level. Look at his goal record. It's not that great. He's young, could improve, but there's no guarantee. Gyökeres's record speaks for itself, but plays in a weak league. The thing with Sesko there, we go back to Alexander Isak, we're talking about above now as a £150 million player. When he was at Sociedad and Arsenal were being linked with Isak, I vividly remember all of the talk there was, he's only scored 8 goals this season. He's not prolific. All the talk was that. And now a couple of years later, look at what he's doing at Newcastle. So And everyone's then saying, why didn't we scout him? Why didn't we sign him before Newcastle signed him? And that could happen. I'm not saying it will, because obviously it's an unknown, but that could happen with Sesko. If you don't sign him now for 50 million and then he goes somewhere else and starts banging them in, suddenly you're looking maybe at a 150 million pound player yourself that you've just let go. So I don't think you can necessarily just look at his goal record and say it's not good enough. He's a 21-year-old. His goal record is very, very good for a 21-year-old striker. I mean, he scored, six in his last 7. Now he's on a hot streak. He shows he can score goals. He can score all types of goals as well. So I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing, looking at his goal record now at 21 years old and saying, no, you can't sign him. If your recruitment team is really, really hot on him, and Arsenal's clearly is, because he's a long-term target and he still is a target even after what happened last summer. If all your recruitment team are that hot on him, then you've got to trust, in a way, your recruitment team. Yes, they've got things wrong in the past, but all recruitment teams do. But if you really, really back yourselves and think this is the guy, then for me, that's good enough to go and try and get the deal done. Right, from one striker to another, let's quickly talk about Erling Haaland. Then he signed a new 9.5-year contract, one of the most lucrative deals in sporting history. Apparently, I've seen reports of up to sort of £500,000 a week. That's unconfirmed. But that sort of money. And then on top of that, there's image rights and things like that that could make it even more. It's a huge, huge deal. Mammoth deal. 9.5 years. Takes him up into his 30s. I think it's 2034 or something like that. That it runs out. Obviously, it's a massive deal for Man City. It's a massive deal for Erling Haaland. But in terms of what it means, potentially, I think my first thought of it, well, I mean, Man City must be very, very confident they're not going to get hit with much sort of sporting sanctions here from the 115 cases they're going through. Can you really tie someone down to that amount, that length of contract on that amount of money? Even if you're Manchester City, if you're worried about relegation and things like that, who knows? But that was my first thought, I have to say. I mean, for City, obviously, amazing news. You've got arguably the best out-and-out striker in the world tied down for basically his whole career, if he wants to now, his whole career, which is unbelievable stuff. How I'd love to see Bukayo Saka sign a contract like that. It'd be very nice. Or William Saliba. Don't think it's going to happen, mind you, but it would be very, very nice. But it's a huge deal for Manchester City, no doubt about it. A huge deal for the Premier League. So Erling Haaland here to stay. How do you feel about that? Let me know in the comments below. Right, let's move on to Saturday. I was going to say Sunday then, but Saturday evening's game against Aston Villa. See Unai Emery returning to the Emirates again. He had an amazing day here last time, unfortunately, with that 1-0 win towards the end of last season, which ultimately cost Arsenal the title. Arsenal will be desperate to avoid, did I say 1-0? It was 2-0. Desperate to avoid a similar result this time around on the back of the Tottenham win. Really important game, this one for Arsenal. Can they back it up? Liverpool at Brentford as well this weekend. It's a tricky game for them. That game's before Arsenal versus Aston Villa, so Arsenal will know the result by the time they kick off in that game. It's going to be a tough game for Arsenal. I think it's going to be certainly far tougher than it was against Tottenham. Arsenal looked absolutely shattered as that game wore on against Spurs. The amount of sort of intensity they put into that game and the emotion of it all as well. Hopefully they've had a good sort of little bit of a break. I'm sure they did very, very little at London Colney yesterday. They have a proper training session today ahead of the game against Villa. Some big decisions for Mikel Arteta to make. You would sort of think, I mean, there's not many things he can do in terms of sort of injured players coming back or anything like that. We'll get an update from him in his press conference a little bit later on about whether Calafiori is potentially going to be available or not. Even if he is, I can't imagine he comes into the starting 11 for this game. I imagine Lewis Kelly would keep it. I think you look at what's going on up front. I think there'll definitely be a change there from what we saw in midweek. Gabriel Martinelli, I fully expect to come back into the side for Raheem Sterling. So I think it'll probably be Martinelli on the left. Trossard probably moves over to the right, and then you can have Kai Havertz up front. Maybe he can do something in midfield. I don't think I really want him to. I think I probably want to keep the same midfield that played against Tottenham. I'd be a little bit concerned, I think, about changing things in that midfield because it's going to be such a key area of the pitch in defence. As I said, I think Lewis Skelly keeps his place at left back, so it's going to be Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Lewis Skelly. I mean, the only sort of options in midfield are Jorginho or Marino, of course. I had a couple of messages here. John here got in touch, says Villa have not been convincing. Look at their last 10 matches, nothing to shout about. We should be beating them 3 or 4-0, something like that. I like that optimism, John. I'm not quite sure we're going to be able to do that. For the lineup, I'd go Raya, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Lewis Skelly, Jorginho, Marino, Havertz, Sterling, Trossard, Martinelli. I mean, that's very attacking. So what have you done there? There's no Odegaard in that no Odegaard in that team, no Partey, no Rice. John, I don't agree with you here, mate. I think that this is Aston Villa you're talking about. I can't see him doing that. Your notes, you say Lewis Skelly deserves to start for being outstanding against Spuds. Jorginho needs minutes and can keep the game in our control and do good through balls. Save Partey for the Champions League. Marino, Rice gets the rest ahead of the Champions League. He looks shattered. Can't afford to break him. Havertz, good player. Good playing behind striker like Trossard. Trossard has been so good as a number 9. He's better in front of goal than Havertz. So now he's a great goal under his belt. Give him another go as a number 9. Yeah, I mean, look, I get what you're saying, but not for me, and certainly not that midfield. I think this is going to be a really tricky game. If you're going to make any changes and rotate players and do it in the Champions League game against Zagreb at home, who you would think Arsenal can beat no matter who they play in midfield, this is going to be this is a huge game for Arsenal. Absolutely huge. I certainly wouldn't be leaving Odegaard out. I certainly wouldn't be leaving Rice or Partey out for this one. I think you've got to play the strongest possible midfield. And then, maybe make some changes for the Champions League game in midweek. Deej says most important position for this one will be Rice returning to a number 6 role. Rodgers rinsed Partey a lot in the reverse fixture, got out of there with a win, but can't forget how much Partey struggles when we're on the back foot. Rice, Marino, Odegaard for me. I agree. Yeah, look, Rodgers had a really good game, but that wasn't just against Partey. Rice struggled against Rodgers as well in that game against Aston Villa. I think Arsenal just looked very leggy then. It was right at the start of the season, wasn't it? Partey was getting up to speed. Those first few weeks of the season, you could see Partey was struggling a little bit to sort of for fitness and getting himself up to speed. Rice looked absolutely shattered after the Euros. I don't think we'll see the same sort of performance from those two against Rodgers this time around. I mean, Rodgers is a fantastic player. I've got an awful lot of time for him, and he's very, very good running with the ball. But I would absolutely back Partey and Rice to deal with him a lot better this weekend than they did in that reverse fixture right at the start of the season. So, no, I wouldn't be moving Rice back to 6 for this one. I'd be keeping him as an 8. As I said, I'd go in the same midfield, so I'd have Partey 6 and then Odegaard and Rice ahead of him. Right, before we move on, just quickly, big news for Arsenal women. Renee Slegers has now been given the job on a full-time basis. It's just been announced earlier this morning. She has now taken on the head coach role until the end of the 2025-26 season. She said, I'm so excited to be continuing our journey together. It's a wonderful honour to represent the club as head coach, and I have so much belief in what we can achieve. Over the past few months, I've felt such a powerful sense of collective ownership and responsibility across our players and staff. That has been our strength, and I know we'll make sure we drive and nurture this feeling as we all move forward. It has meant the world to me to feel the closeness and passion of our supporters during this process, and I want to thank you all for that. We want to deliver something beautiful that's inspiring and leads to winning trophies. We all have a big part to play in achieving that. So congratulations to Renee. I think she just made it basically impossible for Arsenal not to give her the job on a full-time basis. She's done so well since she's taken it on in the interim role. Won 10 out of 11 games, drew the other. Won the manager of the month for December. She won all 5 games in the Champions League to take Arsenal top of the group as go through as Group C winners. She's just done a remarkable job in sort of righting the ship and getting things back on track again. And Arsenal have been doing quite an extensive process in terms of looking across the world really for a full-time successor to Jonas Eideveld, but I think Renee Slegers just made it impossible for the club to ignore what she was doing. So she's got the job until the end of the 2025-26 season. And yeah, I think she absolutely deserves it, I have to say. So congratulations to her. And that's it for this morning. Thank you very much for watching and for listening. As always, like I said, press conference coming up a little bit later on today with Mikel Arteta. I will try and come back here later on to go through the big talking points from what he's had to say. So until then, enjoy your day. I'll speak to you very, very soon. Bye-bye.